The whole LeBron to LA saga really hasn't gotten that much attention compared to the other times that he left. It makes sense when you look at it because A, I think the expectations are considerably lower with him joining a cast of 20-year-olds instead of other superstars, and B, DeMarcus Cousins' Thanos snap broke Twitter and kind of cast a shadow over all free agency talk. But at some point before that, I was thinking, there's gonna be a day where we really have to sit back and digest the fact that the Cleveland Cavaliers managed to lose a top 3 player in history not once, but twice in his career. How? How did it happen? How was it possible to have a player with this generational talent and you're telling me you couldn't do anything to convince him to stay over 7 years? And then when he came back and nobody ever thought he could leave again, you still kept him unhappy enough to leave a team that wasn't even that much better than what he had? Well, that's what you're going to learn in the next 2 videos. We're going to look at the most important events through both of his stints in Cleveland that left him unhappy enough to leave his hometown franchise not once, but twice. And if you want to see your hometown franchise play next season, you can do so with the SeatGeek app. SeatGeek app pulls tickets from all over the web and has them in one place, so buying is really easy, and it also assures you're going to be getting the best value for your ticket. While you're doing your search, each ticket is ranked with a score from 1 to 100 that lets you know if you're getting a good deal or not for your purchase, and on top of that, it gives you a detailed view of what you would see from your seat if you were actually there. If you're interested in downloading this app, the links are going to be in both the comment section and highlighted in the description. If you're still on the fence, consider using my promo code DOM2K to get $20 off your first purchase. This is the app I used when I went to the Warriors and Magic game last season, and it made the whole process really simple, so I definitely recommend this for you. If you look back throughout history at several top players, a lot of them were drafted into favorable situations despite the fact that that's not supposed to happen when you're a lotto pick. Magic was drafted to the Lakers, who already had Kareem. Hakeem was drafted to the Sampson-led Rockets that had potential to be one of the greatest teams ever. Kobe jumped right into the fold with Shaq, and at least Jordan got picked by a franchise that executed on a vision to improve his supporting cast. The Cavs, however, were just the Cavs. No rich history, no past success, and the roster itself had plenty of unrecognizable faces. Even the faces you might recognize like Ricky Davis or Carlos Boozer were either claiming that LeBron was only there to support their game or that a high school kid couldn't contribute anything right away. But okay, this is somewhat what you'd expect, right? He's the #1 pick, so of course he's going to a desperate franchise with a team that's not ready to contend yet. Well, here's where the inept management starts to come into play, because if you remember basketball this far back, Ilgauskas was a good big man. He averaged 17 and 7, was an all-star the year before, and he had a decent shooting touch to match LeBron's game. And then there was Boozer, who was also drafted 1 year before LeBron, and he went on to become a top power forward a few years later. So this sounds like a pretty decent start considering you've just drafted one of the best players ever, but here comes Cleveland management to save the day. Carlos Boozer was a restricted free agent in the summer of 2004. I'm gonna say that again for the people in the back, a restricted free agent. The whole point of restricted free agency on young players is so that the team has all the control. It's so a young star like LeBron, or Carlos Boozer in this case, doesn't decide 2 years after being drafted that he doesn't like the city and takes off before the team has even had a chance to build around him. So Boozer was in that situation, but instead of just treating it like a business and matching whatever contract offers he got, they decided to release him from his contract on the agreement that he would still stay with them for a different amount of money. Can you guess what happens next? Yeah, dude was on the first plane out of Cleveland where he landed in Utah with Deron Williams to eventually form a dynamic duo. And that one is just tragic because there's something telling me having a power forward averaging 21 and 10 would have definitely increased LeBron's chances of signing with the Cavs long term. But instead the Cavs ended up juggling power forward duties between Anderson Varejao and Drew Gooden, and the rest is history as far as that goes. And that's also problem #1 on the board, screwing up a simple restricted free agent situation where they had 100% of the leverage. So in their search for a second star down the road, they did make attempts to lure Michael Redd and Ray Allen to the team, which would have been rather significant. Both were amazing shooters that would have provided floor spacing, and Ray Allen would have been a legit second star that probably would have helped Cleveland reach a few more finals. But neither of those happened, so Cleveland made a bet on the next best thing, which was Larry Hughes. He was averaging 22 points in the previous season, so it's not that he was bad, but he was a risk. Prior to signing to Cleveland, he'd only reached the 70-game mark once in his career. Every other season was in the 60s or 50s due to injuries, so this wasn't exactly the ideal player to be throwing rich, long-term contracts at. Whatever, what could go wrong, right? 5 years, $70 million, go ahead and take it. so that didn't work out well. He only played 36 games the first season, and his scoring and efficiency only went down the whole time he was with the Cavs. Despite that, they still managed to make the NBA Finals in 07, which is the other part of this story I need to interject now. LeBron James was such a logic-defying, once-in-a-lifetime talent that the Cavaliers were simply never bad enough to get good positioning in the draft. That's kind of really important to developing a team, especially when the management isn't all that smart to begin with. For instance, when Jordan broke his foot in his sophomore season, they tried to keep him from coming back so they could tank and get better talent. In LeBron's first 7 years in Cleveland, they won 50 games or more 4 times, so drafting a better team was out of the question, and apparently so was management making good decisions. Speaking of which, they eventually had to get rid of Larry Hughes because of his diminishing performance, and getting anything of value for that contract probably wasn't possible. The best thing they got in return for him was an over-the-hill Ben Wallace, but they do deserve some credit for bringing in Mo Williams a bit later, which was a decent grab. Still, when you consider the entire roster, it was pretty much just the same mess in a different year. Oh, and it's also important to consider what was going on around the league as a whole at the same time that LeBron's management was giving him spare parts to work with. Out west, the Lakers were working through numerous potential deals that eventually landed them All-Star Pau Gasol, turning them into instant contenders. Around that same time, the Boston Celtics formed the Big Three, and that was super important because when the Cavaliers made the finals in 07, the East really didn't have a beast. The Miami Heat were crippled by injury, and the Pistons were old and falling apart, so for all anyone knew at the time, LeBron was going to be able to continue to muscle them into the finals. That finally brings us to the 2010 season, and a bunch of critical things happened here. First, after losing prematurely in the playoffs the past 2 years despite winning 66 games in one of them, the Cavs realized LeBron may be getting frustrated heading into a contract year. So their desperate win-now decision pushed them into bringing in a Shaquille O'Neal that wasn't just over the hill, he was over like 2 or 3 hills by this point compared to what he once was. But in all fairness, before he played a game for the Cavs, the last memory we had was him averaging 17 and 8 for the Suns, so it seemed like a decent move at the time. Then he actually played for Cleveland at a game weight of like 2,000 pounds and only appeared in 53 games while dealing with injuries. However, the Shaq decision wasn't the biggest thing that happened in Cleveland that year. The biggest thing that happened was management playing it safe in their last chance to convince LeBron to stay. When the trade deadline came up, everyone who knew basketball could clearly see Cleveland was headed down the same road as before. Great regular season team, but they were not suddenly about to beat the Celtics or Lakers in a playoff series. Now, the media was eating their second straight 60-win season up, so at the time they were favorites to win the East, but anybody should have been able to forecast their eventual second-round exit. So the trade deadline involved some massive, franchise-altering decisions. There was a deal on the table for Cleveland to acquire Amar'e Stoudemire from the Phoenix Suns, and all they had to do was trade Ilgauskas, JJ Hickson, and a first-round pick. If the Cavs do that, they're immediately favorites to win the 2010 NBA title, as I'm telling you, there's no way anybody would have beaten the prime LeBron and Stoudemire on the same team, there's just no way. But the Cavs decided that second-year man JJ Hickson was just too valuable an asset to part ways with. They thought that if LeBron left in free agency, Hickson would be a solid backup plan to bet on for the franchise. Having actually watched Hickson play that year, I can tell you not to laugh at his 8 points and 4 rebounds a game because he was emerging as an important piece of the team, but I can also tell you that there's no way in the hell he was worth hanging on to in a potential Stoudemire trade. But that's what they went with, so instead of acquiring a player that could have definitely convinced LeBron James to stay, they swung a different, safer deal in which they could retain Hickson while also bringing in Antoine Jamison. At the time, any amount of help for a player as good as LeBron James seemed pretty significant, and we remember Jamison from the Gilbert Arenas days. So it seemed like a smart move, but it still kind of falls way short of the deal that would have brought in the ultra athlete that was averaging 23 points on 55% shooting. So the Cavs finally got what they deserved a few months later. After years of terrible management decisions, terrible handling of the payroll, talent acquisitions, and not going all the way on their win-now plan, the 61-win team was beaten in 6 games by the Boston Celtics in the second round of the playoffs. LeBron was dejected as he should have been, and he went through with the Avengers initiative to wreak havoc on the NBA. But the debate from this should be, without the advantage of hindsight, how bad did Cleveland really screw up? Because plenty of unconfirmed rumors say that the Big Three had been planning on joining forces one day since their time at the Olympics. Well, if that's true, then did the Cavaliers ever really have a shot at retaining him by that point? Sure, they made it easy for him with all the bad decisions, but let's say the Cavs did trade for Stoudemire and for some reason they still wound up losing at some point in the playoffs. The part that I didn't mention was that Amar'e was also a free agent and any number of factors could have still caused him to leave the Cavs, which would have still resulted in LeBron leaving the Cavs, and trading valuable assets for that potential situation was a really big gamble at the time. Of course, after a good 7 years of never getting LeBron another legit star to play with, all caution should have been thrown to the wind. That should have been an issue they vowed to figure out some other time, and all focus should have went to making the franchise cornerstone as happy as possible. So after he left, Dan Gilbert wrote the infamous letter, which is gonna be super important for part 2. I'll link you to the letter, but it basically said that LeBron ain't shit, he's a traitor, a bad role model for kids in Cleveland, and also hilariously claimed that the Cavs would win a championship before him. Bad thing to say to a guy that actually ended up right back at your door 4 years later. How did the Cavaliers mess that one up? We'll go through that on part 2 of examining the NBA's most incompetent franchise. And that's what I got for you guys today. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button, comment, and sub, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications when I drop part 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.